Hello, and welcome to Series 7 of the International Soccer Podcast. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. In this six-part series, we are doing a group-by-group preview of African Cup 2021, which is being played in early 2022. Today, we'll be talking about Group B, which involves Senegal, Guinea, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. And we'll be doing today a team-by-team overview of each of the teams in the group.
Right, so we're going to divide the podcast kind of into three parts. In part one, we'll be looking at an overview of the group. We'll be looking at a comparison of the size of each country and some information about the population and stuff. In part two, then, we will do a team by team overview. So going one by one, looking at each country's long history, recent history, and qualifying record, and a brief overview of their players. So the long history includes their World Cup and African Cup histories. And finally, in part three, a discussion of their prospects and our predictions, which includes a look at the ranking, the odds, their head to head records, and a discussion. So let's move on to an overview of the tournament, Connor.
All right, so as I mentioned, this is a 2021 African Cup, even though it will start in January 2022. It's being hosted by Cameroon, and there are 24 teams competing. This is the second time there's been 24 teams. The first time was in 2019, having expanded from 16 before that. The top two in each group advance, along with the top four third-place finishers. And then just briefly about qualifying. So the qualifying structure, there was a preliminary round to reduce the 52 participants to 48. The 48 teams were then divided into 12 groups of four, with the top two from each qualifying group advancing to the finals.
That's great. All right, well, let's take a look at the countries. We'll do a little geographical information and also population. Do you want to take it away, Connor?
Sure. So starting with Senegal, Senegal occupies the westernmost part of mainland Africa. In terms of size, it's almost 200,000 square kilometers, which is 34th out of 54 countries in Africa. It's similar in size to Syria and Uruguay. And then its population is just over 17 million people, which is 23rd out of 54 countries. So kind of right around the halfway or middle mark.
Right. And after Connor presents each country here, we'll do a bit of a comparison so that you can look at them side by side.
Next is Guinea. Guinea is a neighbor of Senegal, a southern neighbor. It's about 250,000 square kilometers, so 31st in Africa. And it's actually almost identical in area to the United Kingdom. And it has a population of 12.9 million, which is 29th largest in Africa.
All right, on to Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe is almost 400,000 square kilometers, so large. It's the largest country in this group. It's 26th largest in Africa, so still just kind of about mid-sized overall. And it's slightly larger than either Japan or Germany, so still a fairly large country. It has a population of 15.8 million, which is 26th largest in Africa.
Okay, and where does that sit in Africa, Connor?
It sits in the south, so it has a border with South Africa, somewhat on the eastern side, but it is a landlocked country in southern Africa.
Right, okay.
And finally, Malawi is another landlocked country. It's 118,000 square kilometers, so 36th largest in Africa. And it's similar in size to North Korea, slightly larger than Iceland. It's a long, skinny country with Lake Malawi forming much of its eastern border. And its population is 18.9 million, so 21st largest in Africa.
Right, and that looks like it's a little bit north of Zimbabwe there.
Yes.
Northeast. Okay, well, let's kind of review that information in a comparison.
Yeah, so all these countries are actually very similar to each other in terms of both size and population. They're all kind of middle-sized countries on both measures. In terms of population, They all rank from 21st to 29th. So again, very similar to each other. In terms of population, the largest is Malawi with 18.9 million, followed by Senegal with 17.2, then Zimbabwe with 15.8, and finally Guinea with 12.9. So again, all fairly similar to each other.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let us begin then with a look at Senegal. Maybe you can give us some preliminary information on Senegal.
So their nickname is the Lions of Teranga. And they wear their white and green kits.
Right. Okay, well, we'll begin with an overview of their participation and achievements. So Senegal entered their first World Cup in 1966, but withdrew, joining the African-Asian boycott that year. So they participated in their first World Cup in 1970. They didn't enter the 1990 World Cup, but participated consistently otherwise. African Cup participation began earlier in 1965, and they took part in every edition except for 1980. Their local group is WAFU, or the West African Football Union. There have only been 5 editions of that cup from the first one, which was in 2010, and they have 1 absence there in 2011. In terms of achievement, Senegal has reached the World Cup twice with their best performance, a quarter-final finish, in 2002. That was a very strong period for them, as they also earned their best African Cup finish, second place in 2002, and they repeated that success once after.
All right.
Okay, so let's look a bit closer at the World Cup history there. So Senegal was a very weak team in the early years. In their first 5 entries from 1970 to 86, they were knocked out at the first step, 3 of those times by Morocco. They dropped out of the competition in 1990, as we saw, but they seemed to return a stronger team with a good first round campaign. However, they were no match for the stronger teams in the final round and only earned a point against Zambia and group winner, predictably, Morocco again. In 1998, they returned to being knocked out in the first round, going out at the hands of Togo here, as they had in 1978. Thus, there was no foreshadowing of what came in 2002. That performance started with an impressive qualification in a tough group that included Morocco, Egypt, and Algeria. And it ended in the World Cup finals with a loss to Turkey in the quarterfinals. And along the way, it featured a win over defending champions France in the opening game of the tournament, actually. That glorious tournament in 2002 was almost followed up with another in 2006, but they finished 2 points behind Togo, the away game their only loss over the 10 games. 2010 saw them weakening, a third place finish behind the unlikely Gambia. They went undefeated in the first round of 2014 qualifying, finishing ahead of Uganda, but they fell in a final playoff to Ivory Coast. We're going to look at their next 2 most recent campaigns in more detail to see if they were able to reach the cup a second time.
So we'll start with the 2018 World Cup in Russia. They were one of the 27 top-ranked teams in Africa to receive a bye in the first round. In their round 2 pairing, they tied Madagascar in the first leg away, but won comfortably in the second leg to advance. This sent them to the group stage, and Senegal was dominant and undefeated here, tying second place Burkina Faso twice, but also beating Cape Verde and South Africa twice.
I think you mean the third round of qualifying there rather than the group stage.
Oh, sorry. Yes, so in that, there was a suspicious penalty decision that had helped host South Africa win, but FIFA ordered the game to be replayed, and Senegal won it. They did finish first place in that round 3 group stage, and that sent them to the finals, where they got off to a good start, beating top-seeded Poland, and then they tied Japan. They seemed resigned to let fate control their fortunes with a listless loss to Colombia in the third match, and they were treated cruelly by finishing third in the group stage behind Japan by dint of having more yellow cards, the two having kept identical records throughout.
Tough break there, but that is a second World Cup qualification. Let's see how they did in the recent qualifying campaign.
Senegal once again received a bye in round one, which is just a preliminary round. And then they put in an imperious performance, suffering only a draw in Togo, who were the fourth spot team but finished second. And that came after their advancement was already assured. They won all other games, including both against Congo and Namibia, to finish first. So this has qualified them for the final round, which will be a head-to-head playoff, and their opponent has yet to be determined.
Yeah, I think that'll be drawn on January 26th. They seem to have a bit of trouble with Togo there.
Yeah, they've come up a few times.
Yeah. Let's take a look at the African Cup then, the long history. And they took fourth place in their first entry in 1965, though that's a little less impressive than it seems. There were only, I think, 6 teams playing there in the finals. They qualified only twice from then until 1988, getting knocked out at the group stage in 1968 and 1986. 1990 saw them entering a good period where they passed the group stage 3 times in a row, taking fourth again in the first of that run. However, they failed to reach the cup twice in a row in 1996 and 1998. 2000 was the start of their strong period, we just saw in the World Cup play. That saw them pass the group stage of the African Cup 4 times in a row. A second place finish in 2002, the same year as the reaching the World Cup, made it a glorious year in both competitions. After a fourth place finish in the 2006 African Cup, they alternated between not reaching the Cup or else getting knocked out at the group stage, but doing no better than that until once again passing the group stage in 2017. So we're going to take a closer look at their recent performances, but before we do, let's take a deep dive into their performance in the finals of the competitions they've reached. So African Cup finals in detail. Fourth place in 1965, as I said in the overview, was not as impressive as it seems, given there were only 6 teams in the tournament. Qualifying over Mali and Guinea, though, was a good achievement. They tied Tunisia and both beat. They tied Tunisia, and then both teams beat Ethiopia in the 3-team group stage. The tie was resolved with a coin toss, and that allowed Tunisia, who won it, to proceed to the final, while Senegal lost it and went on to the third place match, which they lost to Ivory Coast. In 1968, they finished third in the group stage behind Ghana and Congo-Kinshasa, which is now Congo DR, and they didn't reach the cup again for 28 years. 1986 saw them knocked out at the group stage again, unluckily, as they finished in a 3-way tie with Egypt and Ivory Coast, but they were knocked out on goal difference. Actually not knocked out on goal difference because they had the same goal difference as Ivory Coast. So it was on the amount of goals scored that they were knocked out in 1986. 1990 started a good run of 3 tournaments where they passed the group stage, but in each case they lost the game immediately after, though that meant a 4th place finish in 1990. From 2000 to 2006, it was 4 times in a row passing the group stage, but only in 2002 did they advance much further than that. In that tournament, they finished first ahead of Egypt and Tunisia in the group stage, and then they beat Congo DR and Nigeria in extra time, actually, to reach the final. However, they lost in the final on penalties to Cameroon. 2008 marked the first time they had been knocked out at the group stage since 1986. Interestingly, they had either not qualified or else passed the group stage. But 2008 ended a good run of 5 cups in a row, and they either were knocked out at the group stage or else didn't qualify for the next 5 cups. In fact, 2012 saw them lose all 3 group stage games to Zambia and to the middling teams Equatorial Guinea and Libya. So that's not a great history since 2002, but let's see if they've improved in recent cups.
So in 2017, Senegal put in a commanding performance in qualification, winning all games over Burundi, Namibia, and Niger. They were the only team, in fact, in Africa to win all their group games. They seemed a more settled and mature team in an impressive group stage at the finals, beating Tunisia and Zimbabwe and getting the points needed from a draw with Algeria to finish first in the group. They were favorites going into the finals. However, they lost to unfancied but eventual champions Cameroon on penalties at the quarterfinal stage. So a disappointing exit for them then.
Right, and a bit of a surprise win for Cameroon, who hadn't been doing well up to that point. Let's take a look at the 2019 African Cup.
Senegal once again finished first in their qualifying group and had no problem taking top spot, suffering only a draw in Madagascar, but winning both against Equatorial and Sudan, though they required a late winner at the home of the latter. They also had a comfortable group stage in the tournament, despite losing to Algeria, who they would meet again in the final. Kenya and Tanzania proved weak opposition, so second place in the group saw them through. Afterwards, they beat Uganda and Benin on single goals, and then Tunisia on a single goal in extra time. However, they lost to Algeria on a single goal scored in the second minute in the final, so that left them with the second place finish.
Great. So that's their second place finish. Actually, that 2017 African Cup, getting knocked out in the quarterfinal, kind of the next step after the group stage, is really kind of their typical performance. So this second place in 2019 was very good. And actually, I don't know if you saw any of the games, Connor, but they looked much more commanding in this cup than in previous cups. Okay, well, we'll just go on to quickly talk about their local tournaments here. The fact is, I've checked, and they don't send their best players to these local tournaments because they have a lot of international players. So they tend to use either local players, or I think recently they've been sending their under-23 team there. So basically, over the 5 competitions, they finished in the top 2 three times, and they've entered since 2010. After finishing second in 2010 and 2013, they were shockingly knocked out of the group stage by Benin and Niger, with Ivory Coast finishing behind them in a complete reversal of expectations. However, they returned in 2019 to win their first title, winning on penalties over Ghana. But again, it can't really be taken that seriously because it's complex. Some of the best teams are not sending their best. It's good to look at some of the weaker teams because they do send their best. So I think these local competitions are more important when looking at weaker teams rather than teams like Senegal. All right. So do you want to summarize the history there, Connor?
Yeah, so Senegal's 2 periods of strength were in 2002 and really from 2018 till present. It's kind of changed everything. And they've remained competitive in World Cup play all the way up until their second qualification in 2018. However, they were unimpressive in African Cup play from 2008 to 15, but they returned to stronger form in 2017 and looked very strong in their second place finish in the 2019 African Cup. So they will hope that the second period of strength is more enduring than their first.
All right, now we'll turn our attention to recent history and just a little discussion before we look at their most recent or their qualifying campaign. So after 2002, they only dipped in strength in World Cup play, but as Connor said, entered a weak period in the African Cup play. However, they were fully back in form, or more accurately, in a second strong period by 2018 when they qualified for the World Cup. After a quarterfinal finish in 2017 and finishing second in the 2019 African Cup. They looked mighty indeed and went undefeated. No, we'll stop right there. And I find I'm kind of repeating myself here. So I just want to add this little detail that somewhere around 2013, there was rioting in the streets after they lost a game to Guinea and to Ivory Coast. And my comments at the time were like, I don't get it. They're behaving kind of like a top team in Africa, but they really haven't done anything to prove that they're a top team in Africa, especially in that period around 2013. Really, they had only excelled in 2002. But I got to say, this period, this recent period of strength does seem a lot more convincing. And that's all I have to say about that.
Well, it is a good lead into their 2021 qualifying for this tournament, where they had a really comfortable path to finishing first in the qualifying group, winning their first 4 games, and then kind of coasting at the end, where they tied third place Congo at home, and then in their final game, they tied third place Congo away, and then in their final game tied at home to last place Eswatini. But they otherwise beat Guinea-Bissau twice, and Guinea-Bissau finished second. So pretty smooth qualification to get to this tournament. And they do look pretty strong coming in.
Yeah, they didn't field their top teams for those last 2 games because they were pretty much assured of qualification. But honestly, Eswatini is one of the weakest teams in Africa, so that's a bit of a shame to lose at home to them. And I wonder if it kind of shows a bit of a shudder in this cup. We'll get to that when we discuss them. Actually, one thing we won't discuss is their recent matches here, because rather than the usual friendlies in the lead up to the tournament, they've been playing those World Cup qualifying games, and I don't believe they have any friendlies scheduled, but they might have scheduled a couple recently. But let's move on to talk about their players a little bit.
Yeah, well, Sadio Mane is, arguably their biggest name, but actually their top goal scorer in both 2021 African Cup qualifying and 2022 World Cup qualifying is Famara Jeju, one time of Bristol City in the English Championship. However, he plays elsewhere now. Playing.
Yeah, while you're looking at that, I'll just comment that he got a hat trick. I mean, these are against weak teams, but he got a hat trick against Eswatini in 2021 qualifying, and then a hat trick against Namibia in 2022 World Cup qualifying. So leading the way, as you say, in both there. Did you find the information you were looking for?
Yeah, he currently plays for Antalya or Alanyaspor in Turkey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but anyways, he has been scoring goals for them, albeit against weaker teams. Sadio Mane is right behind him, and then Ismaila Sarr in 2022 World Cup qualifying. Those three players got 10 goals between them. Jeju 4, and then Mane and Sarr 3. So some pretty big names on the team there. Some other players.
We tend to focus on forwards here, but they have great players all over the field, which we will get into when we start doing player podcasts. I think I've said in the last podcast that we might do a couple of player podcasts for the African Cup teams here, and actually Senegal would be a good one to do it on. Kalidou Koulibaly at the back is a real pillar at the back, and he plays for Napoli. Any others that you want to mention there?
Yeah, staying on the back line, of course, Edouard Mendy is the Chelsea goalkeeper, and a very reliable keeper to have in that position. But really, they have players playing and associated with very big clubs: Napoli, Chelsea, Paris Saint-Germain. So they bring players with a lot of pedigree coming into this tournament.
Yeah, that's right. And I actually, we follow probably English soccer closer than the other European leagues, but I've really liked Ismaila Sarr, who plays for Watford. He hasn't been that noticeable of late, but sometimes he's very outstanding. Okay, well, we're going to do a taste of the player podcast with a featured player here. And our featured player is Idrissa Gueye.
Yeah,
And yeah, go ahead, Connor.
he's been with the national team for since 2011 and has 84 caps in that time. He is more of a central midfielder and probably more defensive, but he has contributed 6 goals. And he currently plays with PSG in France and has since 2019. Previously spending time in England with Everton and Aston Villa, and then with Lille in France. Even further back. So a player who's been in big leagues for a long time, and he's been with the Senegal team, like we said, for over a decade, and has started all their games, or started most of their games in the 2015, 2017, and 2019 African Cup. So a player they've relied on for several tournaments now.
Yeah. So I'm one of many, as we've said. So a really strong lineup for Senegal, and we'll talk about their prospects a bit later on. But shall we move on to Guinea?
Yeah, we'll talk about Guinea, whose nickname is Silly Nacional, which is the national elephants. And they, like many teams, wear a colorful combination of green, yellow, and red in their kit.
Right, and that's the color of their flag also. Well, let's take a look at their participation and achievements. Guinea entered their first World Cup in 1966, but just like Senegal there, they joined the African Asian boycott, so withdrew that year. And actually, their entry was rejected by FIFA in 1970. I'm not sure why. So 1974 was their first World Cup qualification. They participated consistently, but were disqualified in 2002 due to government interference in the sport. They were also disqualified from their first attempt into the African Cup in 1963. They had bested Nigeria in qualifying, but were then punished for failing to provide neutral officials. So I guess it's not difficult to best Nigeria when the officials are part of your squad. They first competed qualification in 1965, and apart from the same World Cup ban in 2002 mentioned above, which applied in CAF as well, other than that ban, they've never failed to complete qualification. And like Senegal, their local group is WAFU. We saw when Connor was presenting geographical information that they're neighbours, both on the west side of Africa. So they're in the West African Football Union. In terms of achievement, they have never reached the World Cup. In recent times, they've reached the African Cup more than half the time. Their best result, though, was in 1976 when they took second place. In more recent times, the quarterfinal is their best finish. And they've made no impression in any of their 3 WAFU Nations Cup appearances. So, moving on to the World Cup. They have never qualified for the World Cup since their first valid entry in 1974, although they came quite close in 1998 when they finished just 1 point behind Nigeria. Until 1994, their first group qualification, they had been knocked out in round 2 of 4, in round 2 of 4 two-team knockout rounds, and 1990 was their worst result. Unfortunately, they were paired with Tunisia in 1990 in a preliminary round knockout, so that was their worst result. Since then, they usually reach the final round of groups, the final round group stage, and they're usually quite competitive. 2010 proved their weakest recent campaign, finishing last behind Malawi, who they meet here. And in 2014, they were no match for a rampant Egypt and failed actually in 2014. To reach the final round. That was the first time, other than the disqualification, that they had failed to reach the final round since 1994. So let's see if they have continued to reach the final round over the two most recent campaigns.
So starting with 2018, they were one of 27 teams that received a bye to round two. In their round two pairing, they beat Namibia in a head-to-head, winning both legs. However, in the round three group stage, they lost all but one game. The exception was a home win over Libya, which they earned the victory on an injury time goal. So they finished last in the group stage, a point behind Libya, with Tunisia and Congo DR, the other teams in the group. So unfortunately for them, not really competitive at all there. Looking at 2022, they again received a bye in the first round. Perhaps distracted by civil war in their country, it was a poor showing for Guinea, who came in as a second-seeded team, but they tied all games with Guinea-Bissau and Sudan, and lost both to group winners Morocco. So they finished third there in round two of three, a campaign they probably want to put behind themselves.
Yeah, and I think they ended up playing a couple of their home games in Morocco. Actually, oddly, all three, Guinea-Bissau, Sudan, and Guinea, all three of them somehow played at least one home game in Morocco. So Morocco had a definite advantage in that qualification, but they were kind of destined to win anyway. Okay, are we ready to move on to the African Cup?
Yeah, I'll let you take us through that.
All right, so we'll start with an overview, and then because we're going into the African Cup finals, we're going to look at that in detail, at their finals history in detail. So let's begin with an overview. Following a poor start in African Cups, they reached it 4 out of 6 times between 1970 and 1980, taking second place in 1976, their best result by far. They disappeared from the finals from 1982 to 1992, but from 1994 they have qualified more than half the time and enjoyed a good period from 2004 to 2008 by reaching the quarterfinals 3 times in a row, a feat that they achieved again in 2015. Failing to, okay, well, we won't go into 2017 and 19 because you're going to give us that. So let's move on to their performance in African Cup finals in detail. Their first final was in 1970, and they only managed a single draw in the group stage. 1974 also saw them fall at the group stage. So their performance in 1976, where they finished second, came out of the blue. Can you take over for a moment, Connor?
Sure. Qualifying over Niger and Togo, they tied Egypt in their opening game of the group stage, then beat host Ethiopia and Uganda to finish first. Rather than the traditional structure of quarterfinals leading to a final, this tournament had a final group stage. There, they tied Nigeria, scoring an equalizer at 88 minutes, and beat Egypt to set up a chance to win the title. Morocco had won their first 2 games, beating Egypt on a late goal at 88 minutes and Nigeria 2-1 on 2 late goals, coming in the last 7 minutes there. Guinea needed only a draw to take the title. Morocco needed only a draw to take the title. Guinea opened the scoring at 33 minutes and held the lead, but Morocco proved the master of late goals again, striking at 86 minutes to take the title, and leaving Guinea in second place. So very, very close there.
Yeah, really tight, a tight tournament there. Do you want me to take over?
Sure.
All right. Well, Guinea didn't come close to repeating this task, and in fact reached only 3 of the next 13 cups, getting knocked out at the group stage in each. From 2004, though, they not only reached 3 cups in a row, but passed the group stage in each. They looked convincing, going in undefeated in the first 2 of these, but they were knocked out in the quarterfinals each time by Mali, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, respectively. And actually, 2008 against Ivory Coast was a hefty 5-0 loss. They reached only 1 of the next 3 cups and were knocked out at the group stage. But 2015 proved interesting. In a tough group with Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and Mali, all the teams tied their first and second games, leaving them in a 4-way tie with identical gold records. In the third game, though, Ivory Coast beat Cameroon, but Guinea and Mali tied 1-1 again, leaving them in a deadlock for second place. It was resolved, Connor. How do you resolve a tie like that in a group stage?
I'm not sure. Do they use discipline as next?
No, that hadn't come into play yet. So they went back to an old system of drawing lots. That was the first time lots were drawn since 1988, and Guinea won. So they went on to the quarterfinals, but that once again proved their ceiling as they lost to Ghana in the quarterfinals. What do you think, Connor, of lots?
I mean, I guess I think the use of yellow cards is probably a better way to do it. But when you have 3 draws and identical records, I mean, it has to be settled somehow. So interesting. So
I got to say that Senegal-Japan deadlock that you talked about before, I think that was the first time yellow cards were actually used. Do you know?
I think it is. It's the first time, I think, in a major tournament. But, probably a slightly better thing than lots. It's probably slightly less random, but not by much, perhaps.
Yeah. Anyway, let's take a look at the following 2 African Cups and see if they've gotten past the quarterfinals in either of them.
So in 2017, their campaign started terribly with a home loss to the Pot 4 team, which was Swaziland, who, as you mentioned, are a perennially very weak team. They lost to them away also, but were otherwise undefeated, besting group winners Zimbabwe and group losers Malawi. However, the damage against Swaziland was heavy, and Guinea, who were actually the Pot 1 team in the group, ended up finishing in 3rd place behind Zimbabwe and Swaziland.
That's a very atypical finish for Swaziland, which is now called Eswatini, by the way.
Yeah. So Guinea failed to qualify in 2017. In 2019, they got off to a much better start. It started with an excellent win over Ivory Coast, and they followed that up with 2 home wins. That proved enough for first place in the qualifying group, despite the fact that they tied their last 3 games. At home to second place finished Ivory Coast and away to Rwanda and Central African Republic. At the finals, they were taken by surprise by an impressive Madagascar, who ended up winning the group in game 1. That opening game finished 2-2. And then they lost to Nigeria on a single goal in game 2. However, they beat Burundi, thanks in part to a red card at 12 minutes to Burundi. And that was enough to make Guinea the top 3rd place finisher. So they finished 3rd but still advanced. However, that paired them with Algeria, so an unfavorable draw, and they lost heavily to Algeria in the round of 16, and Algeria would go on to become eventual champions.
Right. Yeah, and I just want to say Madagascar, I'm kind of sad they didn't make it this time because they were such a joy to watch in the 2019 African Cup. Okay, well, thanks for that, Connor. And we'll just take a look at their local cup tournament briefly. Their local tournament, as mentioned, is WAFU, or the West African Football Union. And we saw with Senegal, there have only been 5 editions since 2010. They joined that edition, but they didn't enter the next 3 and reappeared to participate in 2017 and 2019. They qualified for the finals in 2017, but were knocked out at the group stage. But in 2019, they didn't even get that far, knocked out in qualification by Benin. And then they entered the, if you recall from the last podcast, the plate tournament. So basically, those who don't qualify go on to the plate tournament, and the 8 who do qualify go on to the cup tournament. So they beat Guinea-Bissau and Liberia to reach the final of the plate tournament, where they also beat Cape Verde on penalties. So kind of a consolation prize there. So, you know, they're a respectably strong team in that local region, but actually there's some pretty tough teams there like Ghana, Senegal. So it's one of the more difficult local groups, I would say. Okay, let's summarize. Do you want to do the summary, Connor?
Sure. So in general, Guinea were a third-tier African team until recently when they became second tier. Second tier is our rough classification, suggesting they've reached the final round of World Cup qualifying but don't qualify, or generally reach the African Cup but don't typically advance beyond the group stage. More precisely, though, they are a first-tier team at home and a third-tier team away, with their road record usually their downfall.
Right. Okay, well, let's move on to recent history. And 2014, we saw they failed to reach the final round of World Cup qualifying, something they had regularly done since 1994. But they got there in 2018, although it was an uncompetitive performance, as in 2022. In African Cups, they had a weak showing in 2017 qualifying, but good campaigns in 2019. Although they were a bit unconvincing in the finals there. Let's see how they did in qualifying here for this 2021 Cup.
So Guinea bested group winners Mali, but they were actually less consistent in away games, something we've alluded to. They lost to third place Namibia in their final game, and also drew in Chad, who were actually disqualified for the second half of the campaign. Nonetheless, they finished second in the qualifying group, winning all 3 home games, and that qualified them behind Mali for the African Cup.
Right. Okay. Well, we normally look at recent matches, but it was World Cup qualifiers in this case. So we're going to move right on to take a look at some of their players, beginning with their scorers.
Yeah, well, their top goal scorer in qualifying for this tournament was Naby Keita, undoubtedly their biggest name, who plays for Liverpool, though he's not known normally as a goal scorer. But some other names that do jump out are Seydou Bassouma. He has 9 goals across 36 appearances and plays for Kuwait, or a team called Kuwait SC in the Kuwaiti League. And then another bigger name they have is Amadou Diawara, who plays with Roma in Italy.
Yeah, that's right. And in defense, the most capped player right now is Isiaga Silla. So he has 61 caps and plays for Toulouse. As you say, Naby Keita and Souma up front. Jose Kante is another forward, and he actually plays in Kazakhstan, interestingly.
Yeah, Guinea are another one of those teams that have players playing in kind of clubs all over the world, of a great diversity of club teams making up players from the Guinea national team.
Yeah. Let's move on to our feature player then. I mentioned him. We chose the most capped player there, and that's left defender Isiaga Silla. You want to give us a little bio on him?
Yeah, as you mentioned, their most capped player. So he'll bring a bit of experience to the team. He's only 28 years old, but he's been with the team for a decade now. He has 2 goals to his name, but that's really not what he's in the team to do. He's more there to keep them out. And he's been with Toulouse in France since 2012. So quite a long time, though he did have a couple of loan spells during his time with Toulouse. He started and finished all 4 games in the African Cup 2019, and then started most of their games in the 2015 African Cup. So he's been a very consistent and regular performer for them.
Yeah. It seemed like he kind of got off to a rough start because he got a red card in African Cup 2015 qualifying, and he also, after playing 3 games after being a starter, kind of lost his starting position in that tournament. But it seemed by 2019 he was fully established as a starter, and as we said, he's their most capped player right now. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of Guinea, and we're going to move on to Zimbabwe.
Yeah, Zimbabwe, they're known as the Warriors, and they have a colorful kit that matches their flag. So it's a green kit with yellow, red, and black stripes, which again resembles the 7 stripes across their flag.
Yeah, I kind of got to say, I thought I remembered them playing in yellow in the African Cup. So I wonder if maybe their away kit is yellow. But let's move on. Actually, their first international game was in 1946. They played as Southern Rhodesia, and we're going to see that was a bit of a political issue, the transition from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. But let's do a general overview of their participation and achievements. Zimbabwe entered World Cup qualification in 1970, but then they didn't enter the following 2 editions. They participated consistently from 1982, except for 2018, where they were punished with disqualification for not paying a promised severance fee to a fired manager. They joined the African Cup from 1982, and they haven't missed an edition. And their local groups is actually one of the stronger local groups in Africa, COSAVA, which is the Council of Southern African Football Associations. It was formed in 1997 and consists of 14 nations, and Zimbabwe have participated in all editions. In terms of achievement, they also have never reached the World Cup. They've reached the African Cup 4 times, 2 pairs of successful qualifications in a row in 2004 and 2006, as well as, we'll get to that when we do recent history. They have won the COSAFA Cup 6 times, which is actually once more than both South Africa and Zambia, who have won it 5 times each. And most recently, they won the COSAFA Cup in 2017 and 2018. So there we have a quick overview of Zimbabwe, and let's take a look at their World Cup history. So we alluded to the political problems they had, so we'll look at it here. In their first World Cup qualification in 1970, they played as Rhodesia, and they lost in the first round to Australia. The 2 tied each of their first 2 legs and had to play a 3rd game, which Australia won. All the games were played in Mozambique. That they were played in such a strange circumstance was a result of sanctions by Britain against Rhodesia in their struggle for independence. So that's presumably the reason they missed the following two World Cup qualifications. They returned in 1982 at Zimbabwe, but they were knocked out in early rounds by tough teams in their first few runs. They first reached the final group stage in 1994, where they finished ahead of Guinea and behind qualifiers Cameroon, having beaten both of them at home. They reached the final group stage every time after that until 2010 and were competitive, again finishing second in 2002. 2010 saw them failing to reach the final stage, and they also failed in 2014. So let's see how they've done since.
So in 2018, they initially entered the competition, but as Kevin mentioned, they were expelled for disciplinary reasons, specifically for failing to pay a previous manager a severance fee. So they were disqualified and didn't get to participate. They did return in 2022. They were among the bottom 28 ranked teams, which required them to play in round 1 of 3, which is essentially a preliminary knockout round. Their FIFA ranking, though, was top among this group at 112, where Somalia, who they met, was ranked tied at the bottom at 202. Zimbabwe nevertheless lost the away leg to a tougher than usual Somalia, but they won by a wider margin at home to pass this first round. In round 2, they tied South Africa at home in their opening game, a result which ultimately spoiled South Africa's campaign, but they only earned one more point in a home draw with Ethiopia in their last game. They lost both to group winner Ghana, and the loss to Ethiopia condemned them to a last place finish in the round 2 of 3 group stage.
Right, so not a very good showing there in 2022. We'll see a bit later how they've done in recent African Cup performances, but let's begin with a kind of an overview of the African Cup and then a detailed view of their performance in the finals that they've reached. So for an overview, in African Cup play, they have a remarkable home record, undefeated since 1986, except for a poor campaign in 2002 and a loss to Zambia in 2021. 1994 proved a good year here too, as they went undefeated in qualification, though they still failed to reach the Cup. They did reach the Cup, as we saw, in 2004 and 2006, and we'll take a closer look at that. Again, they were generally competitive and came tantalizingly close in 2013, but falling to Tanzania in 2015 was poor. And a little later, we'll take a look and see if they've done any better since then. But first, we'll look back at the cups that they've reached. And it was only in 2004 that they finally reached a cup. They had come close in several campaigns prior. 2004 was a solid qualification, winning all home games and going one win, one loss, and one draw in their away games. A tie in Mali was a good result, but it had been preceded by a loss at the very weak Seychelles. Even a draw against Seychelles would have seen them finish first, but second behind Mali proved enough to qualify. In the Cup, they lost their first 2 games to Cameroon and Egypt, and a win over Algeria in their third was great, but it was cold comfort because they finished last. Their third place finish in 2006 World Cup qualifying earned them an automatic passage to the 2008 African Cup. And it was a similar story as to 2004. Actually, this is the 2006 African Cup, not 2008. They lost their first 2 games to Nigeria and Senegal there, but again, they won their third game, this time over Ghana. This time it might have been enough since the bottom 3 teams finished tied on points. However, their goal difference was the worst of the 3. And just an interesting detail, all 5 goals against them had been scored in the second half of games. Anyway, it added up to them being knocked out at the group stage again. Despite competitive campaigns coming very close again to qualifying in 2013, where they lost a final knockout to Angola on the away goals rule, they haven't reached the Cup, or they didn't reach the Cup after that. But let's see if they did in their recent campaigns.
Right, so they didn't reach the Cup in 2015, but in 2017, they achieved a terrific result in qualifying, finished first in their group. They were bested by pot 1 Guinea, but then bested a well-performing Swaziland. And then they twice beat Malawi, who seemed their equal at the start of the campaign, but they came out on top. And interestingly, Guinea and Malawi are two teams they meet here. Arguably, the result was a combination of their consistent play and Guinea's inconsistent showing. In the tournament, they got up to a good start, tying Algeria, but lost to Senegal and Tunisia to finish last in the group stage, as was really expected of them. However, they came out looking respectable and had played some exciting football along the way.
Great. All right. Sorry, Connor?
Yeah, in 2019, I'll carry on.
Keep it going.
They came into qualifying as a pot 3 team, but ended up finishing atop a very competitive qualifying group. They won away in Congo DR, very impressive result, but tied at home. But they also bested Congo while exchanging home wins with Liberia. At the finals, they lost to Egypt in the tournament opener by a single goal, and then tied Uganda in one of the best games of the tournament. Despite a heavy loss to Congo DR in their final game, they dominated play, but the result saw them finishing last place in the group stage again, with only a single point to show for their good endeavor.
Right, so that's their four cups, their 4 successful cups have earned them kind of one good result in the group stage and 2 losses every time. Okay, let's move on to talk about their local cup a little bit. As you can, as I said before, the COSAFA Cup is one of the more developed regional groupings, and it's a grouping of Southern African teams. So it doesn't contain actually the strongest teams in Africa, but does include some second-tier teams like Zambia and South Africa. It's, as I said, one of the most competitive local cups in South Africa. And it started in 1997, and they have won the title 6 times, including most recently 2017 and 2018. I'm pretty sure South Africa doesn't send their best to this cup, but I think Zimbabwe do put a good foot forward. I'm losing it here. Take us to the summary, Connor.
So overall, it is surprising that Zimbabwe have so rarely reached the African Cup, especially considering their strong home record. And their away record is not notably bad either. Zimbabwe have ended up just falling short many times. However, with the competition expanding to 24 teams in 2019, we'll expect that they'll be fairly regular participants.
Right. In 2016, they returned to being in the top 100 in ELO rankings, at least, having been below that level since 2008, and reaching the last 3 African Cups, as well as 2 COSAFA titles in 2017 and 2018, which I believe do contribute to their ranking. These are all promising signs. However, their group stage exits in African Cup and fairly unconvincing performances in recent qualification campaigns act as a break on expectations. But we haven't looked at how they qualified for this cup, so let's take a look at that in their recent history.
Yeah, so Zimbabwe came in as a 3rd seed in their 14 qualifying group, but managed to finish 2nd in the group stage. They earned only 2 draws at home, losing their other ones. Those draws came against top finishers Algeria and bottom finishers Botswana. But they beat the latter on the road, as well as winning in 3rd place Zambia. So overall, they had a record of 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses, and finished 2nd in the group behind Algeria, which was good enough to make it to the Cup.
Yeah, that's an uncharacteristic home record. Winning no games at home, and actually that loss against Zambia was their first home loss in African Cup play for a long time. Let's move on then to talk about their players, and we're going to look at their 2021 and 2022 scorers to help us with that. Any names familiar to you there, Connor?
Not so much. They do have a lot of different goal scorers. Goals tend to be fairly well spread out in the team. The top goal scorer over those two qualifiers was Kama Biliat. He plays with Kaiser Chiefs in South Africa, so relatively big club there.
Yeah, I like Kama Biliat. He kind of looks more of an intellectual than a soccer player, and I think he is a very intelligent player. It's even obvious. It's even obvious on the field. Let's just take a look at some of the other players. I think their biggest player is probably Knowledge Musona, and on that note, I gotta say, I think Zimbabweans have the best names, best first names at least in the world.
Yeah, there's a few good ones. Another big name is Marvelous Nakamba, who plays for Aston Villa, but he actually won't be in the tournament due to injury. So quite a big blow, actually, for Zimbabwe to be missing him.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of other missing players. Too. Evans Rusiki, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Rusiki, was a forward who is basically retired from the team or hasn't been on the team for a while. Also, we saw actually scoring in 2021 Tino Tenda Kadaware, but he only played one of their 8 games in 2021. He was injured for one and not selected for 6 others. So, and finally, goalkeeper George Chigova appears to be off the team because he last played in 2019. So yeah, a couple of players missing for them there.
Yeah, the player we'll feature just briefly is one you mentioned, Knowledge Musona, who kind of plays as attacking midfielder or forward for them. He's the captain of Zimbabwe. He's been with the team since 2010. He has 49 caps and 24 goals, so actually a really good goal ratio.
Yeah.
He plays currently with a team called Al Tai in Saudi Arabia, where he's been since this year. But previously he was with Anderlecht in Belgium and had a couple loan spells from them. And also spent time with Ostend in Belgium and Hoffenheim in Germany, and had loan spells with Kaiser Chiefs a couple of times.
Yeah, he was in the 2017 and 2000 African Cups. Actually, was the captain in the 2019 African Cups. I found him a bit wasteful in that cup. You can see by his goal ratio that he is pretty good at finding the net. But I think he'll be leading the line for them here. I like Zimbabwe, and I think the introduction we've just done shows that they're kind of on the edge and maybe should be doing a little bit better. But I always kind of enjoy watching them.
All right, well, we'll leave Zimbabwe and talk about our final team now, which is Malawi. Their nickname is the Flames. And in terms of kits, they wear red, green, and black. So the colors of their flag in various combinations for home and away.
Yeah, pretty cool looking flag and uniform as well. Well, their first international game was in 1957, but they played as Nyasaland rather than Malawi. So they're a fairly senior team by African standards, but they entered the World Cup from 1978 onwards, withdrawing only once in 1994. And they're very consistent in African Cup participation, entering in 1976 and never failing to enter. Their local group, like Zimbabwe, is COSAFA. Again, that's the Council of Southern African Football Associations. And those 14 nations play in the COSAFA Cup from 1997 onwards. In terms of achievement, Malawi have never reached the World Cup. They've qualified for 2 African Cups in 1984 and 2010, but didn't pass the group stage either time. Successful qualification for the 2021 African Cup offers them a 3rd try, They finished second in the COSAFA Cup in 2002 and 2003, but in recent years, the quarterfinals has been their ceiling, even in that local region. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about their World Cup history in an overview. So in early World Cup qualifications, they had little chance to shine as they fell after one or two knockout rounds until 2002. The exception actually was in 1990, where after beating Uganda in a preliminary round, they entered their first group qualification. Despite going undefeated at home and earning a draw in Kenya on the road, they finished third behind Liberia. 2002 saw them reach the final round for the first time. They went on to that achievement three times in a row until 2010. They were beyond their depth in that final round, though, in the first two at least, earning only a draw over the 6 games in 2002, and they finished last of 6 teams in 2006. They performed reasonably well at home, but lost all on the road, including a 7-0 drubbing at the hands of Tunisia. 2010, though, was a bit better as they knocked out Congo DR in the first round and finished ahead of Guinea, who they meet here, in the second. Despite a respectable first round in 2014, they failed to reach the final round, too many draws limiting their success, but having little chance anyway with Nigeria in the group and only one advancing spot available. Let's see how they've done in their last 2 World Cup qualifications.
So in 2018, they entered in the first round as one of the 26 weakest teams in Africa. There, they lost away to Tanzania in the first leg, and despite winning the second, they couldn't make up the goal difference, so they just played 2 games, and it was an early exit for them. In 2022, they were again among the bottom half of teams that were required to play in rounds 1 of 3, effectively a preliminary knockout round. Their FIFA ranking was 126th, and they met Botswana, who was ranked 147th. As would be expected, Malawi bested them, but only scored 1 goal over the 2 legs, that coming at home to win 1-0 on aggregate. They managed only a home win over Mozambique in the following round, which was a group stage, losing away to them in both legs, or losing away to them and in both legs with Cameroon and Ivory Coast for a last place finish. But a difficult group with those top 2 teams there.
Yeah. Right. Well, let's move on to their African Cup history. And in the African Cup, they reached the tournament, as we said, in 1984 and 2010. The truth is they'd been somewhat lucky in both cases, as we'll see when we take a look in detail. And for the most part, they finished last or second last in all the other qualifying groups. And 1996 was curious in that they were undefeated on the road, though it was only enough for a third place finish. 2012 also saw them undefeated over 8 games in the group, but still finishing third. In recent qualifying, 2015 was as close as they came, but once again they finished third, only 2 points behind second place Mali, who advanced. We'll take a closer look at their campaign since then, but first let's take a look at their African Cup finals in detail. Actually, they weren't close to qualifying in the early years, doing well to make it past the preliminary round, but they did so in fine fashion in 1984, beating Zimbabwe in a preliminary round and benefiting from the withdrawal of Zaire in the next round and besting Madagascar in the last round to reach the cup. That actually was a lucky draw, being against Madagascar in the final round, considering some of the other matchups. Egypt had to play Tunisia, for example, and Morocco had to play Nigeria. So Madagascar was not one of the biggest opponents. The group stage, though, proved a bit too rich for them, although they did well to tie Nigeria. That was their only point, though, as they lost to Algeria and Ghana to finish last in the group stage. They had lost 19 of 22 games from 2000 to the start of qualifying for the 2010 African Cup. In fact, it was the qualifying results from the 2010 from 2010 World Cup qualifying that was used, and their record of 1 win, 1 draw, and 4 losses, a third place finish far behind second place, but 1 point ahead of fourth, was enough to earn them their second qualification. So they made it in 2010 thanks to their World Cup record. And once they reached the Cup, they stunned Algeria 3-0 in the opening game, but then lost to host Angola and then to Mali. And as in 1984, they finished last in the group stage. So really a bit out of their depth once they reached the finals of an African Cup. But let's see how they did in 2017 onwards in their qualifications.
Yeah, 2017 was a poor campaign. They came in as a pot 2 team, but finished in last place or fourth out of 4. They did well to earn draws away in Swaziland and Guinea. They ended up besting Swaziland, but it was their only win at home, and they lost twice to group winner Zimbabwe.
Right.
And then in 2019, they were undefeated at home, tying both group winners Morocco as well as Cameroon. And they also beat Comoros at home. However, they lost all 3 games on the road. They actually finished tied with Comoros, but took third place, Comoros coming last in the qualifying group. And that was based on Malawi's better goals record in their head-to-head meetings.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look at the local cup here, and it'll be interesting actually to see, to compare them with Zimbabwe here. That's honestly how I size up weaker teams in the African region, because generally they don't do well on the bigger stages, so you have to go to the local cups to get a kind of a sense of where they stand in relation to each other. So they participated in the COSAVA Cup. So we're only going to talk about it from 2013 onwards here. We've said that they contain some respectable teams like Zambia and South Africa, but they also contain teams like Mozambique and Zimbabwe, and that's kind of the level that Malawi would want to reach. So while they were one of the top 6 teams seeded into the knockout round until 2015, it's indicative of their recent form that they're not now. They've kind of lost that honor, and they have to compete with the weaker teams at the group stage in order to make that final stage. Worse still, they finished last in the group stage in 2017 and 2018, behind Angola, Botswana, and even Mauritius. 2019 saw them reach the quarterfinals again, but it proved fleeting, as in 2021 they finished behind Mozambique and Namibia. Again, that's the level with which they should be competitive, but recently they haven't been. So do you want to take us through a summary of Malawi?
Yeah, so Malawi are at the level of reaching the African Cup or the later stages of World Cup qualifying is actually something of a poison chalice, since they seem to be outclassed once they're there. They were lucky to reach the 2 cups they did and never really came close otherwise. Nevertheless, they did, and they do surprise with a good result or 2, even if it is accompanied by a discouraging number of losses. The level of the COSAFA Cup is more suited to them, but even there they struggle with the middling teams. It suggests that even the expanded African Cup will be a challenge to reach, although an improved performance in 2021 might change that narrative.
All right. Well, let's move on to look at that 2021 qualification, one of their better ones.
Yeah, it was improvement in performance, which saw them reach the cup for the first time since 2010, as you mentioned. Whereas they usually draw games at home, they converted these to wins here. They won home and away against South Sudan, giving them enough to make the last game a crucial battle with Uganda. Going in 1 point behind, such that a draw would not be enough, they won their home game and leapfrogged Uganda to take second place behind Burkina Faso, and second place was good enough to qualify them for this tournament.
Yeah, so a win over Uganda is a pretty good showing. And here they are at the Cup. Let's take a look at some of their scorers.
Yeah, they didn't score many in World Cup in qualifying for this tournament. Just 4 goals across 6 games. Richard Mbulu, he scored 2 of them. He's a forward who plays with a club called Baroka in South Africa. Many of their players actually play in Malawi, with a couple in some other countries, but typically other African countries such as Sudan, Ethiopia, Mozambique, and Tanzania, to name a few.
Yeah, I think some of their best players tend to go to South Africa, as well as the teams you mentioned there are kind of top teams in those countries. All right. Well, we won't get into a lot of detail here because they're not a lot of familiar names on Malawi. They have probably their most experienced player, Chui Kepo Musawoya, with 82 caps and 21 goals, but he seems to be off the squad, having last appeared for the team in November 2018. So I'm sure he's going to be a miss. And also Robin Ngalande is also a forward with 43 caps, and he was injured for their last 7 matches, so I'm not sure he's going to make it to the squad. So in addition to being probably the weakest team in the group, they also have a couple of forwards out of action.
Yeah, one forward who is there, which we'll mention briefly, is Gabadinho Mahango. He has 57 caps for the national team and 11 goals. He plays with Orlando Pirates in South Africa and has since 2019. So like you said, a decently strong team in South Africa, which is kind of where some of their better players end up. He also spent time with a couple other clubs in South Africa, as well as local clubs in Malawi. Not a lot to say on them because Malawi haven't been in a lot of tournaments. But he has played 6 of their 10 games in 2021, on the bench for one of those and not used for the others. But we do expect him to feature, especially with a couple forwards out, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I don't think we saw him on the list of scorers there, but he did score in the 2021 African Cup qualification, and he scored in the 2014 World Cup and 2015 African Cup qualification. So he's been with the team for a while, but as you said, none of them have really played in any international tournaments since 2010 was their last one. So all of those players will probably be retired now. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the team by team look, and we're going to kind of look at them as a group now, and we'll begin with the rankings.
Yeah, so I'll take you through the rankings. So the top seeded team in the group is Senegal. They're 20th in the FIFA ranking and 42nd in the ELO rankings, and that actually, compared to the other teams in Africa, puts them first among the FIFA rankings and third amongst the ELO. So they are seen in both ranking systems as one of the elite teams in the continent. After that, there's a considerable drop to the next team, Guinea. They're 81st in FIFA and 100th in the ELO rankings, which is 15th or 20th in Africa, depending on the system you use. Next is Zimbabwe. They're 121st and 130th in the two systems. So 31st or 36th ranked in Africa. So now we're into the bottom half, actually, of African teams overall. And then finally, Malawi is 129th and 137th in FIFA and ELO. So they're 35th or 41st in Africa. So again, kind of squarely in the bottom half of African teams overall, and one of the lower seeds in this tournament.
Right. Okay. Well, let's take a look. Actually, the odds kind of follow that. A bit of disagreement about whether Senegal is first, second, or third. Odds makers have them second favourites to win the cup. Guinea is, as you say, quite a ways behind, 12th, so right in the middle of the pack. And Zimbabwe and Malawi are towards the end of the pack. Zimbabwe in 20th place, 20th highest ranked team among these 24 teams. And Malawi dead last, least favorite to win the cup. You would earn $376 if you put $1 on them, Connor.
Worth a bet?
No, that would be just throwing money away, I think. But maybe the head-to-head will shed a bit more light. And we'll just do this briefly here. Senegal and Guinea have a fairly even record. Of course, Senegal has a better record over all the other teams, except Malawi, who they've never played before. But their record with Guinea is surprisingly even, with 6 wins, 3 draws, and 4 losses. And with Zimbabwe, it is 4 wins, 0 draws, and 2 losses. We saw that we said that they haven't played Malawi yet. Guinea has winning records over Zimbabwe and Malawi. Against Zimbabwe, it's 4 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. And against Malawi, it's 3 wins, 2 draws, and 1 loss. So not having it all their way, but a generally better record. Finally, Zimbabwe and Malawi have played each other a lot, being in the same area. And Zimbabwe has the better record of 7 wins, 3 draws, and 4 losses. So again, not having it all their way with Malawi, but definitely the stronger team. So that brings us to a bit of a discussion about the 4 teams. And let's go, Connor. What are your impressions here?
Well, the rankings and the odds show Senegal as clear favorites, Guinea is a clear second, and then put Zimbabwe and Malawi kind of near the bottom of all teams in this tournament. And I have to agree, I actually don't see this group kind of finishing much differently than that. I think Senegal are a class above, perhaps 2 classes above all the teams in this group, and are one of the favorites for the tournament. Guinea, as we've said, they're kind of a second-tier team and are likely to take second in the group, I would suggest. And then Zimbabwe and Malawi. Malawi playing in their 3rd ever African Cup, Zimbabwe their 5th. They're relative newcomers. Neither have qualified for the World Cup. I think they're probably, more happy to be here, and I expect it to be kind of competitive between the 2 of them, but I don't really see a realistic challenge for second place in the group.
Right, I see it a bit differently. I totally agree with you about Senegal. I think it would be a shock for them not to finish first. On the other hand, we saw that they do kind of drop points sometimes, especially if they win their first 2 games. You could see them taking their foot off the gas in their 3rd game, but that 3rd game is against Malawi, so I can't see them losing that either. But I wouldn't be surprised if they give up a tie, but I would be surprised if they didn't finish first. Guinea and Zimbabwe, I see that as you said you saw Zimbabwe and Malawi as the more contentious position, and certainly the odds and the head-to-head and all that suggest that. But I actually think Guinea and Zimbabwe may be the more contentious thing. Zimbabwe is pretty hot and cold, but I think they can be good. and it depends. Guinea, the civil war in Guinea, the coup seemed to affect them in qualifying, so they may be a bit weaker than expected. And I always feel like Zimbabwe is a bit underperforming and could do a bit better than expected. So I'm not calling it, but I do think it is possible that a good tournament by Zimbabwe or a poor one by Guinea could see them switching positions. But Malawi, I hold out little hope for, uh, maybe a draw against Zimbabwe or something like that. But they've done very well to reach the cup. But we saw that they're generally kind of out of their league at this level. So maybe happy enough to reach the cup.
Yeah, they may come in with slightly higher expectations, just in that they were lucky to reach their other two African Cups, as you talked about, but they were kind of worthy qualifiers here. Coming ahead of Uganda in kind of that battle for second was impressive enough. So they maybe come in with a bit more optimism here than they have in other times. But I do think they'll be a little bit out of their depth. And I think possibly points against Zimbabwe, but I think I think they'd be up against it to even kind of get a draw otherwise.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I like the African Cup is that we saw in the 2019 version, Madagascar really outperformed themselves. Mauritania were quite good. Benin were quite good too. So you never really know if they're going to play above themselves. And if that's the case, if 2019 proves to be a kind of a sign of how it's going to go, then expanding to 24 teams was a great thing, because honestly, those teams who made it because it was expanded made the team made the tournament much better. Whereas I found some of the top teams, especially in the group stage, were kind of coasting their way through, and I almost felt annoyed that they were winning on last minute goals. Because they didn't seem to be trying very hard, So I'm always hoping for teams like Malawi to outperform their record.
Well, let's not forget that they stunned Algeria 3-0 in the opening game of the 2010 African Cup. That's a result no one could have predicted. So
Yeah.
you're right. The African Cup throws up some interesting results. I mean, no one's here is, perhaps totally out of it. And we do see these shocks, but they are the exception to the rule. But they do make the tournament interesting.
Yeah, and I gotta say, even though we kind of make our predictions at the end of our podcast here, I'm always kind of happier if they go unexpectedly rather than if they go the way I expect. Even
Yeah.
though it probably makes us look bad as a podcast to be completely wrong.
Well, let's talk just about Senegal for a minute. They were finalists in the last tournament. They come in as either first, second, or third favorites, depending which system you use. What would constitute a successful tournament for them?
I think anything less than the semi-finals would be disappointing for them. And honestly, I think for their fans and maybe even for me, anything less than winning might be a disappointment. But they look so good in 2019. I'm really kind of pulling for them this time, I must say, because I felt they kind of deserved it.
Yeah, I think for a team that has put in some phenomenal qualifying results in recent years, the past couple years, when you finish as beaten finalists, in the last cup, I think you will always want to come in and do one better. So I think they'll be aiming to win the tournament and would be disappointed perhaps not to. But yeah, anything less than the semifinals, I think, would probably be a shock.
Yeah, when I talk to my daughters or my students about like their kind of expectations for exams and stuff, I always go with what do you fear, what do you expect, and what do you hope? In terms of Guinea, we'll forget about the fear, because doing badly would be their fear. But what do you expect and what do you hope for Guinea? Or what would be their highest hope?
I would expect the quarter to be the round of 16. So to get out of the group stage, we've seen that's been a bit of a ceiling for them. So if they went out at that stage, it would kind of be in keeping with their recent history. I think for hope, it's to do one better than that and win a knockout game and get to the quarterfinal. I think that would be considered improvement and not a bad tournament for them.
Yeah, I mean, they've reached the quarterfinals a lot of times, but there was never a round of 16 before that. So I agree with you. Kind of one step beyond, one step into that final stage would be an achievement for teams like Guinea. Whereas in the past, that was a good result. It's a very good result now. I agree, and I think they'll be happy actually to qualify in second place. It caused them to face Algeria, the eventual winners, to go through in third place last time. So they may get a better opponent in the round of 16 if they go through in second. Do you think Zimbabwe has a chance even of passing as a third place team?
If they beat Malawi, they could end up going through as one of the best third place finishers. In which case, it would probably come down to goal difference if that was their only victory. So, I think if they can be competitive in the games against Senegal and Guinea, maybe get a point against Guinea, as you suggest, may be possible, and then beat Malawi, I think they'll be kind of focused on winning that game and perhaps on goal difference kind of being on their mind in all three of their games. I think a narrow loss to Senegal and perhaps even Guinea is not the worst result and could give them hope of going through.
Right. I've said that even second place is not out of the question for Zimbabwe, but I do feel the round of 16 would be their ceiling. How about you?
I feel that would be their ceiling, and I think it would be a very successful tournament should they get out of this group even in the third place finishing spot.
Right, and I think we both agree that Malawi finishing above bottom spot, they'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
Whether they pass in third place or not. All right, well, I've had enough of you dallying, Connor. I want you to give it to me straight. What's the order of this group going to be?
The order is going to be Senegal, Guinea, Zimbabwe, and then Malawi. And in fact, I'm going to put points on this, which will perhaps make me a fool, but I think we'll see a straightforward 9 point for Senegal, 6 for Guinea, 3 for Zimbabwe, and 0 for Malawi. I see this group is fairly straightforward. So there it is. It's on the record. That's what I'm predicting for Group B.
Okay, well, I'm going to be a bit contrary, and I'll probably be dead wrong, but I'm going to say Senegal goes through. I'm not going to give points. I'm going to say Zimbabwe and Guinea finish tied. And hey, just for fun, I'm going to say that Zimbabwe takes second on yellow card count.
We'll see if it comes down to that.
Great. Well, it's been great talking to you about this, Connor. Do you want to take us out with the information about the podcast?
Yeah, so you can find this podcast and all our ones for the African Cup as they become available on our website at Soccer Files. That's Soccer Files with a PH. .captivate.fm. You can also search Soccer Files Canada and find us that way. And if you have any comments or questions or suggestions, you can email them to us at soccerfiles. I'll spell it out this time. It's SOCCERPHILES @gmail.com.
Great. All right. Well, we'll be back for Group C. And thanks for your help with the podcast, Connor.
I'll see you next time.
You betcha. Bye-bye.